Hey everyone. In part 1 of this series, I talked about Antifa's upcoming riot scheduled for the week of January 20th, 2019. I discussed how Antifa infiltrates other organizations to provide cover for their operations, including this upcoming riot. I also outlined how Antifa members operate both legally and illegally. Many of them are employees of left-wing charity and political advocacy groups, but also operate as Antifa terrorists. In part 2 of this series, I did a deep dive into the dozens of organizations I discovered working with and funding Antifa, and how Antifa uses these organizations to recruit and indoctrinate new members. Antifa also uses these groups to shape public opinion and to gain sympathy for their terrorist activities. Links to both of these videos are in the description below. While all this information is public knowledge, and many have spoken out on each of these stories individually, I don't know of anyone else who has put them all together in one place like this series does, except for maybe Alex Jones. After I released part 1 and part 2 of this series, I had many viewers ask, why hasn't Antifa been arrested and charged yet? This video answers that question. You see, in addition to the many non-governmental charities and advocacy groups Antifa's infiltrated and co-opted, this video shows how Antifa members and supporters have infiltrated Silicon Valley and the highest levels of the United States government. With that out of the way, let's get started. The Washington Times reported in 2017, "Resist movement, violence are tearing America apart." The first skirmishes of the Second American Civil War have begun. No, this is not a metaphorical analogy to that bloody conflict that killed approximately 620,000 Americans. It is an objective statement of the reality in America. Since the election of 2016, the left has gone crazy. Their version of the Tea Party is called Resistance, and the spearhead of that is a loosely formed terrorist group called Antifa. Antifa is short for anti-fascist. The irony of their name is not lost on those who actually know history, as their tactics are straight from the fascist playbook. Conservatives and those perceived to be conservatives have been attacked. The weapons have included glitter-filled gel, urine bombs, chains, bicycle locks, and baseball bats. As their violence becomes more intense, it is now only a question of when, not if, someone will be killed. Violence is not limited to pro-Trump rallies. The same Antifa group has made college campuses virtually no-go zones for conservatives. Noted conservatives such as Ann Coulter, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Ben Shapiro cannot go onto many college campuses to speak without having their events disrupted to the point where they cannot go on. If this violence continues, the choices are not good. The left-wing academic establishment has quickly surrendered to these groups. Is there a solution short of a real violent civil war in America? So the takeaways of this article are very clear, okay? Journalists have actually been concerned about civil war since early 2017. And the Resist Trump movement's frontline troops are Antifa terrorists. And if you've been reading the headlines, then you would know that at least since 2016, conservatives have been targeted for Antifa terrorist violence. But more importantly, many left-wing groups have been co-opted and taken over by Antifa terrorists. Now, the problem here is that Silicon Valley has jumped on the bandwagon. According to NBC News, want to resist Trump's racist agenda? There's an app for that. This year, 1,000 apps have bloomed online amidst post-election chaos. With no direction from Day's party officials, a diverse mix of programmers, lawyers, mothers, because, mothers are important, and political operatives have taken upon themselves to build new tools to harness the energy created on the left to oppose President Donald Trump's actions and policies. Okay, this article, if you look in the small print that I highlighted in yellow above the author's name, this article was in February 2017. So these apps have been around for a while. Let's go through them. Here are some of the most discussed new startups powering the so-called resistance. Daily Action. Daily Action is a text message-based service that gives subscribers a single thing to do every day, such as call Customs and Border Patrol office at every major airport to demand they release data on how many people were detained under the President Trump's travel ban. More than 220,000 people have subscribed to the service since it launched in mid-December, with about 10% regularly making calls. Wall of Us. Two lawyers in Berkeley, Amelia Mizad and Kara Ganter, have a similar idea when they launched Wall of Us a week after the election. Mizad said she hopes Wall of Us, which gives people 4 suggested actions each week, can find its own niche with a pleasant design and a focus on corporate activism. With about 60,000 users, Wall of Us is looking for funding and will be hosting an upcoming Wonkathon that brings together coders and policy experts to try to build new tools. Town Hall Project. A simple idea with a no-frills presentation that requires a ton of work behind the scenes. The Town Hall Project is perhaps the only comprehensive list of public meetings for members of Congress that is easily available to everyone. 5 Calls. Created by Bay Area techies, 5 Calls is designed to make it as easy as possible to find your members of Congress and call them. It provides scripts, weekly email alerts, and has generated nearly 400,000 calls according to the website. Okay, so in other words, you don't even share your message. You share their message. They give you the script of what to say. So in other words, these people aren't even actually making sincere calls with sincere concerns. They're just parroting somebody else's script, and 5 Calls admits it. Let's move to the next one. It Starts Today. It Starts Today is based around a highly unorthodox approach to funding campaigns that founders compared to opt-in public financing. The site offers monthly subscriptions starting at $4.68, 1 penny for each House and Senate seat on the ballot in 2018, and then evenly distributes the money it raises to every Democrat who makes it to the general election in those races. Flippable. This app's founders are developing a statistical model to anticipate which state legislative districts are the most flippable and important, and have already funded $135,000 for 4 candidates they've endorsed in the upcoming special elections, a significant sum in low-spending state legislative races. The Resistance Manual. A type of Wikipedia for anti-Trumpers, the Resistance Manual provides information on major policy issues important to progressives and what might happen to them under Trump, along with suggestions about how you can resist. In other words, it's fucking fiction. Okay? What might happen to them? Look, the world might end. You might step off a curb and get hit by a car. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not, but it's in the realm of possibility. You'll probably be more likely to win the local lottery than you will to be hit by a car. But we're going to go ahead and use scare tactics of the Resistance Manual just so that you have this fiction of fear that you can go ahead and push as a legitimate narrative. Think about that. Swing Left. Launching just before the inauguration, Swing Left helps people find their nearest competitive congressional district where they can work to try to oust a Republican or support a Democrat ahead of the 2018 midterm election. White House Incorporated. This is probably, by the way, one of the most insidious apps on this list. White House Incorporated helps users randomly dial one of 30 or so Trump properties, in other words, his private properties, where callers can lodge a complaint about Trump's plans to repeal Obamacare or build a border wall. More than 33,000 calls have been placed, lasting a total of 113,000 minutes. Rise Stronger. The former Iraq director at the National Security Council founded Rise Stronger to bring together other people with expertise in various backgrounds to try to help to develop resistance strategies. It sounds like a deep state operative to me. So this article has a lot of bullshit to unpack. So with that in mind, what are the takeaways? Silicon Valley is providing thousands of apps to help Antifa and their supporters to coordinate harassment of Trump and other politicians. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are currently using these apps. Remember, many of these apps were launched since Trump was elected in 2016, so they've been around for a couple years now, and this report was launched in 2017, almost 2 years ago. Now, these apps are being used to create a nationwide Astroturf campaign to take control of the country and to oust President Trump. Even more disturbing is that big tech platforms are allowing these apps to exist on their stores. Yet, apps like Gab, Minds, and InfoWars get banned from these app stores all the time. It's like they don't even see how hypocritical they're being. So if you want to support actual terrorism, if you want to support the illegal overthrow of the government and commit federal crime, that's okay. Put your app on our app store. But if you support freedom of speech, if you support constitutional rights, and you are actually competing with big tech friends of ours, fuck you, get off our platform. That's not antitrust at all. You know, the other thing is that these apps are being used to clog up government phone lines to prevent them from conducting legitimate business. This costs taxpayers money because they have to fund the man hours needed to deal with these bigots' bullshit. And again, like I said, White House Inc. This app is being used to harass Trump properties for political gain. I want you to think about that. Private businesses are being targeted because their owner won an election. How is this not terrorism? This has happened over 30,000 times, according to White House Inc. They do this to wrongfully increase labor costs to try to put Trump businesses out of business. This is unethical and wrong, even if it isn't illegal. Now, for the most part, nobody's criticized these app creators or the apps themselves. Now, my other concern is that because these apps are political in nature, I'm concerned that they may foster violations of federal election laws related to in-kind contributions and may constitute harassment. I'm also concerned that they appear to be a form of cyberstalking for political gain. Now, everyone remembers when DHS Secretary Nielsen was harassed while at a restaurant by Antifa. But for those who don't, let's summarize. CNN reported protesters from the Metro DC Democratic Socialists of America confronted Nielsen on Tuesday night. "If kids don't eat in peace, you don't eat in peace," they chanted. "No borders, no walls, sanctuary for all." Now, the New York Post wrote a follow-up to that story, and they state, one of the protesters who heckled Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen at a Mexican restaurant has been revealed as a Department of Justice employee, according to a report. Allison Hararber, God, what a horrible last name, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, told the Washington Examiner on Wednesday that she was among the group that shouted "shame" and "how do you sleep at night" at Nielsen while she dined at the MXDC Cochina Mexicana on Tuesday night. All right, so here's the takeaways. We know from the last video that the Democratic Socialists of America are associated and working with Antifa. We know that because of their connection to the Mutual Aid and Disaster Relief Fund, which is calling for January 20th riots, along with BAM, another Antifa terrorist group. All right? I talked about this in my last video. Again, a link to that is in the description. One of the Antifa members was an employee of the Department of Justice. She was a paralegal. The question begs to be asked is, how many more DOJ employees are actually undercover Antifa supporters and resist members? While that's a concern for me, it should be a concern for you as well. In fact, not only has Antifa infiltrated the Department of Justice, they've also infiltrated the White House. And they even had the balls to admit it. I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. I work for the president, but like-minded colleagues and I have vowed to thwart plans of his agenda and his worst inclinations. The Times has taken a rare step of publishing an anonymous op-ed essay. We have done so at the request of the officer, a senior official in the Trump administration whose identity is known to us, but whose job would be jeopardized by its disclosure. We believe publishing this essay anonymously is the only way to deliver an important perspective to our readers. It's not just that the special counsel looms large, or that the country is bitterly divided over Trump's leadership, or even that his party might well lose the House to an opposition hell-bent on his downfall. The dilemma, which he does not fully grasp, is that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. I would know. I'm one of them. This is an admission of a conspiracy. And this person who works with the resistance is clearly, whether he understands it or whether she understands it or not, is an Antifa supporter. They're a senior official in the Trump administration, and they're also working to promote Antifa, whether they realize it or not. Now, this senior official is a traitor and an enemy to the United States. And even worse, this person admits that they're not alone, but that there are other traitors in the White House at very high levels of government. Now, the New York Times knows who this person is, but they're not telling anybody. They're protecting him. To me, the New York Times, by protecting an admitted traitor at the highest levels of government, is committing treason as well. Now, Silicon Valley, undercover agents in the federal government from the Department of Justice to the White House are advocating for the overthrow of our government. Under U.S. Code 18, subsection 235, this is a federal crime, and to me, it's treason. Now, I know many people who oppose Antifa consider them to be useless children to be ridiculed and mocked. And they do, and I agree with this completely. However, since 2016, Antifa have evolved from soy boy retards to an actual guerrilla fighting force, willing and able to commit a wide variety of crimes and terrorist acts to overthrow our government. These terrorists and their supporters have infiltrated Silicon Valley and the highest levels of the United States government. We know they've infiltrated the White House and the Department of Justice. The question is, how many other federal agencies have been infiltrated by Antifa and their supporters? If our government doesn't start being proactive and root out these terrorists soon, there may be no solution other than civil war. I'm DDJ, and this has been your dose of misandry today.